This time on Dead Pedal Garage, I am back in my dusty barn and I'm working on this free four-wheeler that I picked up from a friend of mine, and I'm going to show you how to get something that's been sitting around for a long time running again. So I'm going to get to it. So I used a VIN decoder online to see what the VIN number is on this, and it says it's a 92 Yamaha Big Bear. And the basics of how I'm going to try and start this thing apply to pretty much all internal combustion engines. You need air and fuel to go into the engine, and then you need spark to light that. And then of course you need the engine to produce compression and to be timed right so that all that stuff happens at the right time. So I will more than likely end up using these parts, but I am going to try and get this thing started or running without it to show how you can get something going for under $5 using just some starting fluid and go from there. So the first thing that's got to be figured out is how we're going to turn the engine over. If you have a kickstart, that's great. You don't need anything. Mine does not. It's electric start, so I'm going to have to figure out a battery. It doesn't have one. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how to get the battery situation going, so that's something that you should just probably figure out for yourself. This one, generally it's just going to be as simple as hooking up positive and negative and making sure your ground's good, making sure positive's good. In this case, I've got a bunch of random wires in here, and as you can see back here, the battery tray is rusted and gone, and then there's again a bunch of random wiring. There's some wires here, black and red. There's some wires here and back here. And there's actually 2 starter solenoids on here. So I'm going to skip ahead to where I get this figured out so that we can continue the basics of figuring out how to get it started. Got a battery hooked up, and while there is a proper way to do this by tracing where the ground needs to be and tracing from the starter and the ignition for the positive, being a little bit lazy, I just wanted to try and get this thing to turn over to know whether or not it's worth continuing trying to fix, at least from here. So this thing is, wiring is all kind of crazy. The negative has some bunch of stuff on it, so I got that going. And then the positive actually have 2 black wires and 1 red wire that are all positive wires, and they're going to some small starter solenoid here that actually runs up and goes to another starter solenoid. So I'm assuming one of these solenoids don't work, and so instead of replacing it, I guess it was just looped around to a new one, but whatever. So from here it should turn over. Now that we have the battery hooked up, all we need to do is turn the key and see if we have any electrical, and then see if we can get it to turn over. So we have lights. The neutral light is lit up. Brake light's on. So let's see what we get. All right. So let's turn that off, and we'll move on to the first actual step of trying to get this going. I'm going to start by pulling the seat off to get to the air filter box. Start by pulling that off. So step one is we need air and we need fuel. The air is filtered by an air filter, which this one just came apart into my hands. And so that stuff that looks like dirt is actually air filter. But that's okay. We don't need to change the filter just yet because we want to see if it's going to run. The carburetor on anything that's sat for a long time with modern fuels is going to be gummed up and stopped up. I highly doubt that it's going to just work immediately, though the tank is dry, so it might. But I'm just going to start with some starting fluid to see if it starts. If it starts, that means that we do have spark, which would mean that all we need is to make sure that we get fuel and this thing will run. Any carburetor has some sort of a choke to begin with. You'll find them on levers, little flip switches type thing, not electrical switches, but like a lever type switch. This one actually has a pull type choke. So we'll pull that first. And what that does is restricts the amount of air going in so that there's more fuel, because when an engine's cold, it needs more fuel, less air in order to actually start. So then we'll spray a little bit of this in there, try and start it, see what happens. And there you go. It is running just with some starter fluid. We didn't change anything else out. And so what that tells me is we can go through, change our air filter, change our spark plug so that we have good, strong, new spark, and then we'll rebuild the carburetor. Once we do those things, the engine should run on its own without having to use any kind of starting fluid. All right, so I'm going to pull the carburetor off to clean it up, and I'm going to pull the petcock off to clean it up, and then I will get it all put back together and get back with you to show you if we can get it to actually start. I'm not going to go through the whole process of rebuilding the carburetor in this video because I want to try and keep it simplified. We're just talking about the basics of air, spark, and fuel, and so I'm just going to keep it simple. And I will put another video out over here to show rebuilding this carburetor in case it's something you do want to see. Now that the carburetor, petcock, fuel tank, and the gas line is all rebuilt and replaced, got it all back together, got the battery on, we just checked the oil. The oil surprisingly looks really good. So we're going to leave that oil in there. I'm going to change it once it's all running and everything. But for now, we're just going to see if we can get it going. Pull the choke out. Make sure the fuel is on. And it's running. So the fuel mixture screw had to be adjusted a little bit because it was replaced. So the initial adjustment on a carburetor, usually just go until it stops, you know, without a lot of force, just gently, and then one full turn out, and that'll get it started, and then just a little bit of tweaking. This one, it was pretty good, just a little bit quarter turn. And then the actual idle is what was causing this one to not stay running. So I had to adjust the idle up a little bit. But let's cut it off. And there we go. And that was a very simplified look at how to get something running that sat for a long time. And from there, in the future, I'll actually do some videos of making this thing actually work. It's got all the cables were seized or broken. So the throttle cable's no good. The brake cable's totally seized. And of course it needs grips. These are totally shot. The brake master cylinder is bad. So in future videos, I'll go over that. But for now, that's going to do it for this one. So thanks for watching.